Hello, my friends, and I hope you are having a fantastic day. Today, we are going to once again, because it's just the issue that never ends, revisit the Yasuke situation with Assassin's Creed. Now, it is definitely becoming a much bigger deal in Japan than I'd ever anticipated. I'll be entirely honest. I know we've discussed in the past the fact that the government seems to be getting involved. I just didn't really anticipate it blowing up in the populace as much as it did. And I only stumbled across this because, as usual, Twitter, Grums made a post regarding a Japanese historian, Yuhiro that put his opinion out about Yasuke, and we will read that in just a second. A number of the things that are being said about this historian, because he is apparently a historian. He's also an entertainment consultant and works with the Pony Entertainment Group along with others. And he, of course, backs up the claim that Yasuke was a samurai. Now, we will be covering a bit of this. I do not have the time tonight, unfortunately, to go through and pull all of the tweets I would have liked to, because trust me, there is so much out there. I will provide a link to the main players pages in the event that you yourself would like to go through and browse. But there's a lot out there, folks, so much. So I am going to give you as much of an overview as I can in the time I have. So here we have Mr. Hirayama's post. He says, "It seems there's a lot of talk about Yasuke, a black man who served Oda Nobunaga. There are very few historical documents about him, but there's no doubt he was a, quote, samurai, end quote, who served Nobunaga. Regardless of one's social status, if one's master promoted one to the rank of samurai, one could be one in medieval, warring states, society. I can say this because historical documents state that 1, Nobunaga gave him a stipend, 2, he was given a house, and 3, he was given a sword. Being given a stipend and serving Nobunaga closely fulfills the important requirements of a contract between master and servant, an agreement to receive a stipend. It is also important that he was allowed to carry a sword, so he was a two-sworded servant, not a servant. Servants were not allowed to carry swords. And if he was given a house, there's no room for doubt. He was probably a slave until Nobunaga took over the missionary slave, but due to 1 to 3, he probably became a samurai of his own volition. During the Hinoji incident, Akechi's side did not kill Yasuke because he was a, quote, animal, end quote, or, quote, not Japanese, end quote. But that was only because Akechi did not recognize Yasuke as a samurai, probably because he had discriminatory feelings. At that time, it was common for a master to promote someone of low status to a, quote, samurai, end quote. To begin with, there is a good example in Hideyoshi." Now, there is a community note on this, and this says, "Given the historical context, the statement that he was a samurai because he was given a sword and servants are not allowed to own swords are incorrect. At the time, the custom of donning a wakizashi, short sword, as a celebration of coming of age at the age of 15, known as tosashi, was widespread, especially among farmers. In Freud's account of the sword hunt in Japanese history, it is said that many people, including farmers, carried swords. In the Muromachi period 71 craftsman poetry contest, there are many scenes depicting craftsmen wearing swords. For example, in 41, Kurawari is wearing a large and small sword." And then you'll say, "This post does not prove that Yasuke was a samurai, but is a hypothesis based on the poster's perception. As Thomas Lockley has noted, there are no historical sources that state Yasuke was a samurai. There's some debate as to whether Yasuke was a samurai." And then it says, "This historian's only speculating. Factually, there's nothing which proves that Yasuke was definitely a samurai." And then this one says, "Note that, as Hirayama himself says, a person like Yasuke, who is not given a surname, even if he serves, is a low-rank samurai, which does not imply that Yasuke is of noble status. European samurai who were given surnames include Katsunari Yamashina and Anjin Miura." I'm not sure what that one had to do with anything. And then, of course, you have the other community notes, one that says the community note should be written in the language of the post, one that says it's a clear hypothesis, note not needed, stop abusing community notes. And then he said, so he just confirmed there's no additional context to be added. A low-rank samurai is still samurai. Also, why'd you even add the European samurai? Completely irrelevant. So that is the war going on there. Grums then posts one of Hirayama's critics and says, I don't know if this fellow's name or not, and I'm not gonna butcher it. I'm trying not to butcher too much tonight. This is one of the biggest critics of Hirayama. He refutes Hirayama, saying that Yasuke was never proven to have been given a house and was described as a baggage carrier. If you translate more of his tweets, you can see how our arguments have reached a fever pitch. If nothing else, this proves Japan is mad, and all the wokies claiming Japan is not upset or it's all alt poster bots are just plain gaslighting. And I tried to find the actual tweet for this one. I looked for quite a while. It's part of why I don't have a lot of time. But I did find plenty of other tweets for us to go over. So here he says, in the Shinsho Koki, Yasuke is described as a baggage carrier and only carried a short sword. Above all, he was not given a, quote, house, end quote, and did not have a surname, so he was probably one of the Nakama Shu, middle-ranking soldiers, rather than a samurai. There are records of him serving as a bodyguard to protect Nobunaga at Honnoji Temple, but he was the only one to survive as he was not considered a samurai. Now, this fellow has been posting prolifically. There's a lot of stuff here, but I really just kind of want to hit a bunch of the highlights to give people an idea of what's going on, because there really is so much more beyond just the surface of the whole, was Yasuke a samurai or not thing. There's so much going on here. So here you see the verdict of Warring States period expert Mr. Goza. If the account that Yasuke was given a sword in a house is true, then it would be natural to call him a samurai, but it is odd that he doesn't have a family name. This account only exists in manuscripts from the Edo period, so it's unreliable. There is strong suspicion that this story was exaggerated later, so it cannot be determined with certainty that Yasuke was a samurai. And then he links to this article. This article talks about the same thing we've been talking about, that Yasuke served Nobunaga, and now there's a controversy about the research of Thomas Lockley, who's thought to have influenced the character in Assassin's Creed. And this, he says, the most reliable source on Yasuke was the contemporary primary source, the Itada diary written by Matsudari Itada, a vassal of the Tokugawa clan between 1577 and 1594. According to the account on April 19th, 1582, May 11th, 1582, Matsudari witnessed Yasuke accompanying Nobunaga on his return to Azuchi, touring the Tokaido Road after his campaign against the Takeda clan. I present your lordship Nobunaga his stipend, a large daos, accompanied by a black man, his body made of ink, his height 6 feet and 2 bu, and his name Yasuke. Nobunaga employed a black man named Yasuke. He was said to have been presented to Nobunaga by a missionary. However, this description alone does not make it clear whether Yasuke was a samurai or not. A passage that appears to be related to this black man, Yasuke, appears in a letter written by a Jesuit missionary, Louis Fros, on April 14th, 1581, March 11th, Tensho 9, to missionaries in Japan, including in the Jesuit Annual Report in Japan. In the letter, Frois mentions that a few weeks earlier, a black man he was working for had attracted the attention of Japanese people during a journey. As he was leaving the town of Sakai, a crowd had formed to see the black man. Since the Jesuits officially prohibited the use of slaves, it is believed that the black man had been a servant of the missionaries, perhaps a servant of Alessandro, and I'm not going to try the last name. I can't do it right now. The leader of the group, under some sort of indentured servant or a fixed-termed contract. Furthermore, in the same letter, Frois described how Nobunaga, having heard of the reputation of the statue among the public, Frois writes a discriminatory matter. It would have been very profitable to make it a spectacle. I don't know how that's discriminatory, but okay. Invited a black man to see for himself. To check whether the statue's skin was really black, he stripped the upper half of his body. It's poor translation there. I think by statue they mean man. very large man. Anyway, this continues going on, describing about how Nobunaga wasn't convinced that he wasn't dyed with ink, and he stripped his body and he looked at it, and they traveled around and did things, and he states at the end that they should be cautious in concluding that Yasuke was a black samurai, meaning he's not sure. I think from what it reads as you go through, he kind of thinks so, but as there is no hard proof, he's saying, you can't just say that. So the next tweet the fellow retweets actually is this second article, and we'll translate this post. Today's most read article, third place, Nobu Akita, Assassin's Creed problem summary, did Yasuke rise from a black slave to a samurai? He points out that the story of Yasuke's transformation from a black slave into a samurai is fiction with no historical basis, and discusses the dangers of Associate Professor Lockley's claim being treated as fact. And again, this goes over a lot of the same stuff. But he says the problem is the original author, Tom Lockley, associate professor at Nihon University, claims that it is fact and has falsified Wikipedia and other sites. Thanks to this, people like David Atkinson started believing it. If the media were to report the novel as historical fact, it would cause a big problem, like the comfort women issue. It is important to put out this kind of problem early, so I will write down the details of the facts. This problem can be divided into two parts. Was Yasuke a black slave? First of all, was Yasuke a slave? The currently popular book, Nobunaga and Yasuke by Tom Lockley, writes as follows. Yasuke caused a stir whenever he traveled inland. He appears to have started a trend among local notables, Christian or not, to use African slaves as symbols of authority. Yasuke was both a trendsetter and a pioneer. The source of the fashion of using African slaves is not given. It is unclear who the local notables refer to, but they were probably the Sengoku daimyo. This would mean that Oda Nobunaga also used Yasuke as a slave. It is true that Nobunaga received Yasuke, who was probably a slave, as a gift from the missionary that I can't pronounce right now. But this is the only concrete example of an African slave. There is no other examples of Japanese people using black slaves, and no black slaves have been used since Yasuke. There is no record of Kato Kiyomasa using black retainers, but these were different people. The word slave appears many times in this book, but most of the examples are from overseas. In other words, Lockley's story that black slaves were popular among Japanese notables is completely unfounded. If this were a novel, there would be no problem, but Nihon University counted this as an academic book and hired Lockley. Hiring a professor for a work of fiction raises suspicions of research misconduct. Second, was Yasuke a samurai? The other issue is not as self-evident as the issue of slaves. It is a historical fact recorded in the Shincho Koki that name I can't pronounce presented a black man to Nobunaga as a tribute, and there is no doubt that Nobunaga called that black man Yasuke in the variant text. But he was not a slave. Yasuke played a major role during the Hinoji incident when Akechi, whose name I'm also not going to pronounce because I'm tired and I'm not going to butcher it right now, launched a surprise attack on Hinoji Temple with an army of 13,000. Nobunaga only had around 30 guards, so he committed seppuku. Yasuke escaped from Hinoji Temple and rushed to his eldest son, Oda Nobutada, at Noji Castle, but Nobutada also committed seppuku. Yasuke's whereabouts after that are unknown. Wow, he was bad luck. The question is what status Yasuke held. The Shincho Koki records that he was given a short sword and a house and served as a tool carrier, so it seems likely that he had a job similar to that of a bodyguard. Whether or not this person can be called a samurai, high-ranking warrior, is a matter of definition. In the Edo period, samurai were required to have a family name and carry a sword, so it was impossible for there to be a samurai without a family name. Some people say that the definition of a samurai was broader during the Sengoku period, when warriors and farmers were not differentiated, but it is hard to imagine a samurai without a family name. Beware of spreading black slavery rumors around the world. It is not a big deal, but Lockley made it into a story that a black slave was selected by Nobunaga and rose to the top, and BBC and CNN also reported it as such a new discovery in history. NHK also aired a 90-minute documentary called Black Samurai on BS. The show was supervised by Lockley, and the story is based on his book. Yasuke's existence has been known for a long time, but there's no historical documents to call him a samurai. This is because it is unthinkable to call someone without a surname a samurai. Moreover, the show synthesizes the story of many black people, even calling a vassal of Kato Kiyomasa a different person, Yasuke. This level of historical falsification is common in NHK's programs, but if Lockley's story of a black slave who became a black samurai is performed in Hollywood or Broadway in the future, and the fake story that black slavery was popular in Japan spreads, it could be misused. Lockley is like Seiji Yoshida. His novel was absurd, and Japanese people made fun of him, but the Asahi Shimbun picked it up, and the Korean self-proclaimed former comfort woman spread the rumor. White people don't know the area, so they believe lies like Atkinson. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs also needs to be careful. So you see they're very concerned about the idea of Japan enslaving black people spreading around the world for a number of reasons. I kind of can't blame them. As soon as you have your name attached to that in any way, shape, or form, a lot of people tend to get kind of pissy at you. Now, it's not to say people don't have their own reasons for being upset at this kind of stuff, but you know. So here we are back at the tweets. And without going forever deep into this, because trust me, we could trace back forever. I'm giving a really brief overview. Don't feel like I have the time that it would take to correctly express what's going on here. But here we have, I guess this person is a YouTuber or something. They say that they stayed here because they wanted to understand what was going on and find their own solution, but they're suffering from severe slander in various quarters. If a historian is subjected to severe slander every time he expresses his views, that would be suppression of speech. This person responds, "Nice to meet you, Professor Oka. Thank you for your hard work. Excuse me for interrupting. The slander and online harassment of Japanese history researchers regarding their historical perspectives has reached a level that has been reported as an example of threats to academic freedom in Asia and is recognized internationally as a form of suppression of speech." And our friend comes out and says, "Now the open letters are finally here. At this rate, they will likely expose anyone who criticized Lockley in an open letter. Historians across the country should be on their guard." An open letter is basically group comes out with their issues. They can add names to their list of people who are not necessarily... Hello, cat. Really? All right, anyway. People who aren't necessarily conforming to what they feel they should conform to. In this case, it would be people who are criticizing Lockley. So basically cancel culture. This account tweets out, "The reality is, thanks to Mr. Hirayama Yu, or Yu Hirayama, if you're going to say it the American way, the rumors spreading overseas are way too dangerous. Someone help me. The people who originally told overseas YouTubers that samurai was a misconception, he fought in a strong tone, calling them Nobunaga's pets and slaves, so that it may be considered racism against black people." Hirayama's words, "There's no doubt that Yasuke was a samurai," were translated into English and spread, leading to the claim that historians who deny this are conservative reactionaries, and those who criticize historians who defend this are attacked in open letters, creating a complicated situation. Speaking of the professor we were talking about before, this is their profile. It says, "According to a government official who was concerned about my flaming, they are very worried that if this kind of thing about the Japanese internet becomes known, especially to African countries, it could have an impact on Japan's current diplomacy and business in Africa. Who is it that is trying to damage Japan's national interest by playing with, quote, history," end quote. Then he responds, "Along with the open letters, there is a chorus of cancel culture chanting, 'Africans will be angry. If you doubt that Yasuke is a samurai, you will be publicly criticized.'" Here he's responding to that first article we read. "Mr. Goza's article will likely be the next target of open letters. Anyone who doubts Yasuke was a samurai is racist." Is basically that's the direction they're going, even in Japan. If you doubt this, if you don't think automatically that Yasuke was a samurai, if you want proof that Yasuke was a samurai, then you are racist. Now in this tweet, this fellow is talking about Thomas Lockley and that he considers his book an academic book. Here, I'm just going to call him Ike, why not? responds, Lockley writes carefully in his book, but in his videos aimed at black people, he tailors Yasuke's story to appeal to black people, saying things like he was Japan's first foreign samurai, he rose from a slave to the top, and he was worshipped as a black god. So here's another fellow who's making a point. I think the point is not that Yasuke was not a samurai or warrior, Nobunaga's servant, but that Yasuke was not a military commander or daimyo. It would be impossible to treat a samurai, just a servant, without a family name or family crest, wearing a fine military commander's armor with a crest as historical fact. There is no such armors remaining and no written record. And Ike says, even if we give in and accept the definition that Yasuke was a vassal equals samurai, he was a bodyguard who only carried a short sword and a club. So this depiction in Assassin's Creed is incorrect. So he was given a sword, but apparently it's described as a short sword as opposed to the longer sword. Him talking about Lockley and the fact that Lockley used his own research to edit Wikipedia, but then that the Britannica had him write the entry on Yasuke. So using, of course, his own sources. So now that record, that falsified record, in Ike's opinion, is out there for the world to read. All of this leading up to a petition to ask Nihon University to fire Thomas Lockley. And this person is apparently upset about that, but, let's see here why this petition matters. Thomas Lockley, an English teacher and associate professor at the Faculty of Law at Nihon University, has altered the English Wikipedia entry for Yasuke, a real black person who lived during the Azuchi Momoyama period in Japan, by adding an unpublished paper that will be submitted to the future as a reference including the person's rank and background. He later published a book titled Nobunaga and Yasuke, the Black Samurai Who Survived the Honji attack, and once again made edits to Wikipedia to accompany it. In Lockley's book Nobunaga and Yasuke, the Jesuits took a vow of poverty, opposed slavery and slave ownership, and treated them as equals, but local dignitaries, whether Christian or not, wanted black slaves as a symbol of their authority, and their demands were reluctantly meted out, and black slavery became popular in Japan. The word korobozu, to refer with people dark skin determined by the race Kurosian. Yasuke, a black man who was favored by Nobunaga and served him, but whose rank is unclear, is introduced as a samurai of the ruling class. Oda Nobunaga worshipped Yasuke as a god, likening him to Daikokuten because of his black skin. Daikokuten is based on the Hindu god Shiva, which was far removed from the religious views of Japan at the time. Where black Buddha statues were believed to have black skin, the original skin of gold envelopes and other items peeled off and turned black from years of inhaling incense smoke. This is the exact opposite of historical fact. In a Japanese book, this would be dismissed as a ridiculous depiction. In the English version, they proudly present it as historical fact. The Japanese version was published as Yasuke, the true story of the legendary African samurai. It became a worldwide bestseller and is highly regarded as a first-class historical book, especially among African and black communities overseas. Warner Brothers is currently working on adapting it into a Hollywood movie. There are rumors that Assassin's Creed Shadows, which will be released this year, will be based on his book. In the past, Christian missionaries sold non-Christian Japanese people overseas as slaves, bringing black slaves with them and calling them Kafri, an offensive and derogatory term for black people in Portuguese. In the Nanban folding screen by Kano Nazan, the white Jesuit missionaries are wearing shoes, but none of the Africans accompanying them are wearing shoes. He has concealed this fact and spread it around the world, fabricating a false story about the Japanese committing enslavements of black people. This is a discriminatory act against Japanese and black people and an act of destruction against the assets of Japanese history and culture. He is not a law professor, an English teacher, or a historian. It is correct to say that the aforementioned book was written by a Yasuke fan, but it goes far beyond what a fan should do, and since he has deceived the whole world and obtained money from it, it is blatant fraud. If Nihon University has any moral and conscience left, I would like them to accept his crimes and fire him as soon as possible. I don't know that this even has any signatures. Oh no, it's got about 1,179 signatures. Hopefully it is limited to those. Sorry, you couldn't see that very well. I'm getting tired, so I'm not going to do what I would normally do to fix that. We're just going to leave it. I would hope that they have this somehow locked down so that only people in that area can sign it, because I don't feel like this is something that you should be getting people who are in no way directly connected to this signing. This should be about the college, the people of Japan and the college goers, I guess. Either way, there is a lot going on here. There are people very concerned that the perception of the Japanese is going to turn into that they were a bunch of black slavers. There are other people who are upset about the fact that they're saying that Yasuke was worshipped for his skin, cancel culture issues, a fight between those who want it recognized. I mean, the number of times I saw a tweet about, even Ike, our friend Ike, had a tweet about the fact that if you say Yasuke was a samurai now, you're woke. If you say he was not a samurai, you're racist. And that's kind of where we are right now. It doesn't matter what side of the coin you fall on right now. You're either one or the other. You're either a racist or you're woke. And the sad thing is not necessarily true on both sides, but that's the way the world seems to like to work a lot lately. Since this video is a little late anyway, I figured I would go ahead and add this in. As posted by Assassin's Creed at 3:05 a.m. July 23rd, 2024. They say the Assassin's Creed Shadows team has a message for our Japanese community. To our esteemed Japanese community, a message from the Assassin's Creed Shadows development team. First, we want to express our heartfelt thanks for all your support for the Assassin's Creed series, which now has its own history spanning almost 20 years. Over this period, for many of our team, creating an Assassin's Creed game set in feudal Japan has been a long cherished dream. Since the announcement of Assassin's Creed Shadows, we have received many positive reactions, but also some criticism, including from you, our Japanese players. We share your passion for history and deeply respect your care for the historical and cultural integrity of your rich heritage. We would like to address a few points to clarify our intentions and creative decisions. This is basically a non-apology, a non-ology. Overall authenticity efforts. We have put significant effort into ensuring an immersive and respectful representation of feudal Japan. However, our intention has never been to present any of our Assassin's Creed games, including Assassin's Creed Shadows, as factual representations of history or historical characters. Instead, we aim to spark curiosity and encourage players to explore and learn more about the historical setting we get inspired by. Assassin's Creed Shadows is first and foremost designed to be an entertaining video game that tells a compelling historical fiction set in feudal Japan. Our team extensively collaborated with external consultants, historians, researchers, and internal teams at Ubisoft Japan to inform our creative choices. Despite these sustained efforts, we acknowledge that some elements in our promotional materials have caused concern within the Japanese community. For this, we sincerely apologize. All game footage presented so far is in development, and the game will keep evolving until launch. Based on the constructive criticism we have received, we will continue our efforts until we put this game into your hands and beyond. We also want to clarify that while we have been consulting with many people throughout the development process, they are in no way responsible for the decisions that are taken by the creative teams in the interests of gameplay and entertainment. Consequently, we respectfully request that any criticism not be directed at our collaborators, both internal and external. Creative liberties and historical inspirations. While we strive for authenticity in everything we do, Assassin's Creed games are works of fiction inspired by real historical events and figures. From its inception, the series has taken creative license and incorporated fantasy elements to craft engaging and immersive experiences. The representation of Yasuke in our game is an illustration of this. His unique and mysterious life made him an ideal candidate to tell an Assassin's Creed story while with the setting of feudal Japan as a backdrop. While Yasuke is depicted as a samurai in Assassin's Creed Shadows, we acknowledge that this is a matter of debate and discussion. We have woven this carefully into our narrative, and with our lead characters, the Japanese shinobi Naoe, who is equally important in the game, our dual protagonists provide players with different gameplay styles. We greatly value your feedback and encourage you to continue sharing your thoughts respectfully. While we understand that meeting everyone's expectations is very difficult, we sincerely hope that when Assassin's Creed Shadows launches on November 15th, players in Japan and around the world will appreciate the dedication, effort, and passion we have poured into it. Signed, the Assassin's Creed development team. As I said, basically a non-apology. They are sorry for nothing. That's the problem with using an actual historical figure in your game. I think they figured that there wasn't enough information on this one for people to get upset, but especially when it comes to something so historically ingrained in a country, you're going to have an issue. You can't just randomly assign what is considered a high rank to any person, and I believe that would go regardless of race or gender, for that matter. People do expect some level of believability, and of course then you have all the other issues. You have the poor cultural representation, despite supposedly being oh so careful about who they talk to. You have the theft of images from other places. You have the theft of the flag. You have the fact that they picked up some guy from One Piece's sword and put it on display as something from them. There's a lot going on here, and the fact that they kind of feel like this apology is going to fix anything. I mean, they at least acknowledge that the idea of whether or not Yasuke is a samurai is under debate, but how can they have carefully woven that into their narrative? I mean, if it's up for debate, but in the game he's a samurai, where is there actually something in the game where it's actually demonstrated that he may not be a samurai? I mean, they have him in a full samurai armor. And I really somehow don't feel like he probably would have worn that in reality. But again, I'm not a Japanese historian. I'm just going off of what I've been hearing from Japanese people. All that said, guys, with the contrast against everything else in this video and following up with this apology, non-ology, apology? Whatever you want to call it. With this note to the community, let me know your thoughts. And I apologize for the late video. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. If you really liked it, you can feel free to share it around, and I will catch you later.